Hello, AP Human Geography. It is Miss Levy here, and we are going to review this FRQ practice that you took, number 5, about agriculture. There's one thing I want to make sure to make a point of. Please, you do not earn half points. Each question is either a 0 or a 1. If you do not properly support, if you do not have complete answers, you will earn 0 points for that question. So for example, on the College Board, the 7-part FRQ is worth 7 points. For each of the questions, you will need to answer and support it adequately and properly in order to earn that 1 point. If you have half the answer correct, you will still earn 0 points. So please, if you do not adequately support, you will not earn any credit for your answer. So make sure you should not have for answers for questions for task verbs such as describe, explain, apply, compare, explain to the extent. All of these should not be one sentence answers. You should have multiple sentences there supporting your answers. If you do not, you will not earn any point. You will not earn any credit for that answer on the College Board test, which is coming up on Tuesday, May 12th at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So again, no half points. I see some of you still trying to put half points on the rubric for people. Do not do that. It's 0 or 1. If it is not properly supported, they do not earn any credit. So on the rubric, on the comments, you could just put, did not adequately support, had half, but still only earned 0. All right, let's go over the questions. Remember, as I told you, if you're fully supporting and you have complete answers, getting 3 to 4 parts of the 7-part FRQ correct is a very good score. So keep that in mind. All right, let's go to A. A says, identify the scale of analysis for the data provided in both maps of apple production. So this is the scale at which we are questioning. So the scale at which we are questioning. In order to get any credit here, they have to have both of these correct. Okay, so again, they must have both of them correct. Okay, so for the map about the world annual apple crop, the scale of analysis means the scale at which you are questioning and comparing is a country scale. They could have national there as well, but it's country or national. The map of the, I'm sorry, this should actually say, that shouldn't say Florida, that should say Michigan annual apple crop shows a county scale of analysis. So again, this should say here, hang on, this should say Michigan, and this should say apple. Sorry about that. All right, so we are back in action here. So again, the world, the scale of the world apple crop production would be a world scale, but the scale of analysis, the scale at which you are questioning it, it is showing to compare at the country level. The map of Michigan, the annual apple crop, that is the scale of it would be state. However, the scale at which you're questioning is at the county level. So please mark that that is a 0 or a 1. They have to have both answers correct to get any points. Next, describe the spatial pattern of apple cultivation in Michigan. The student earns a point if the response correctly describes the spatial pattern of apple cultivation in Michigan as any one of the following. There's a clustered pattern of apple cultivation in Michigan. They could have that. They could have that apple production is concentrated in western Michigan. They could have that it is concentrated in western middle Michigan. Western central Michigan would all be fine. Or they could have that apples are produced in a core and periphery or hinterlands. You can see that there are counties there that are very dark. That means they produce the most. And then there are some that are lighter, meaning that they still produce, but not as much. That's the core and the periphery or hinterland. So again, they get 0 or 1 there. They have to have had one of these answers. Next, C. In the world map, the United States appears to be a large producer of apples. Explain how the world map misrepresents the scale of production for the cultivation of apples in the United States. The response correctly explains how the world map misrepresents apple cultivation in the United States using one of the following. Okay, so they can have any one of these answers. 1. Although apples are only grown in some parts of the United States, the world map categorizes or shows or represents the entire country as a top global producer of apples. I'm sorry, I have made another mistake on this. I have looked through this. I can't even tell you how many times, and I did not catch these, and I have looked through this numerous times. So sorry. So again, although apples are only grown in some parts of the United States, they're clustered growing based on climate and soil quality. The world map, it represents the entire country as a top producer of apples, which is inaccurate. The world map does not show specific areas of apple cultivation in western Michigan or central Washington state or upstate New York, and incorrectly shows that they are all over the United States, whereas again, they are clustered. Or the world map shows all northern states, including Alaska, as well as all southern states, including Florida, as part of the apple cultivation region, when they are not all part of the apple cultivation region. So again, they have to have one of these answers. They can have that not all of the United States produces apples. Apples is concentrated only in certain states or certain areas. That would be an acceptable answer. So again, that is 0 or 1. No half answers there. D. Describe how farmers of apple cultivation could transition from a basic commodity production. Basic commodity production means that they just grow apples, to a value-added specialty crop production. Okay. Students must describe value-added specialty crops as either the following and describe an example. They have to have both here, okay? So they must know what a value-added means, specialty crop. Value-added can mean that it's a change in the physical state or form of the product, okay? So they enhance the value of those apples by changing the physical state or the form of the apple, such as making apples into jam, apples into applesauce, apples into apple pie, apples into apple butter, apples into dehydrated apple slices, apples into frozen apples, apples into apples in a can. Any of those answers would be fine. They have to know, A, what value added means that they enhance the value of the apples by changing the physical state or the form of the value, such as any of those examples, or that the production of a product in a manner that enhances its value, so that they change the production of it in such a way that it increases the value, such as organically grown apples, non-GMO apples, pre-packaged, pre-sliced apples in an individual bag, or a specialty hybrid variety such as Honeycrisp apples. So if they know specific variety like Gala apple or Fuji apple, they know specific varieties, then those are hybrid varieties that also can increase the value. So again, they have to know what value added means, plus they have to have an adequate example of a value added product. Again, 0 or 1, no half answer. So if they only got half of it, they get a 0. E, describe how apple cultivation could impact the environment. First, they have to know that it is negative. Okay, they have to know that we're talking about negative. So they have to say, okay, apple cultivation negatively impacts the environment by. They have to have that it negatively impacts. destruction of natural habitat in order to create orchards or apple farms. They could negatively impact the environment by contamination of soil and water runoff from chemical fertilizers, chemical herbicides, or chemical pesticides. It could negatively impact the environment by contamination of water systems from chemical fertilizers, chemical herbicides, or chemical pesticides. They could negatively impact the environment by increased air pollution from the machinery needed for soil preparation, planting, spreading chemical fertilizers, chemical herbicides, or chemical pesticides. Or they are during harvesting as well, the machinery used during harvesting. Or there could be negative impacts on the environment by increased water usage for irrigation, which leads to increased water shortages. Any of those, but they need to have that it is a negative impact and then have one of these negative impacts tied back to apple cultivation. 0 or 1 here, please. 0 or 1. Next is F. Explain the degree to which apple cultivation as the main agriculture practiced in various areas of Michigan could have negative economic effects. They could have any of these. The dependence on one commodity for economic financial activity can create reliance and can be negative if the consumer's desire, so the people buying it for apples or apple products, if people no longer want those products, that decreases, and people don't want apples anymore, then the economy of the entire area declines because they no longer are selling apples, then they don't make any money, and then the entire economy declines. It could be that it can be negative if they have this dependence on one commodity for their financial. If there is an environmental or climate disaster that leads to no or lower yield, no output of apples, then the farmers do not have any crop to sell, then the economy of the entire area declines because they don't make any money. Finally, it can be negative if the area's entire economy is disproportionately negatively impacted, if the product becomes contaminated during processing or packaging, and they have to throw it away or recall the apples or the apple products, and they do not have any sales, and it actually ends up costing them money. So again, this is whenever you have all of your financial is based on apples and something bad happens to the apple production, then it creates these negative outputs, these negative outcomes. Again, 0 or 1 here, they have to have both, that the dependence on this and the reliance on it can negatively impact, and then they must have these thorough support and explanation here. So 0 or 1. Without support, it's a 0. Finally, G. Describe how apple cultivation encompasses all 3 sectors of the economy, including primary, secondary, and tertiary. In order to earn a point, all must be correct. They have to have all 3 to earn the point. If they don't have all 3, they earn a 0 for this. Primary is extracting raw material, so the farmer who grows and harvests the apples is the primary activity. So the primary is the farmer who grows and harvests the apples. The secondary is turning the raw material into a finished product or processing. So the secondary are the people who work in the applesauce factory. They could be the people who work in the apple pie bakery or factory, be the people who work in the apple butter factory, the people who work in the apple jam jelly factory, the people who work in the prepackaged, pre-sliced apples factory doing that job, those that work in the frozen apples factory, or those that work in the factory putting apples into a can. Any of those would be acceptable answers for a secondary. Finally is tertiary. Tertiary is the service base, so these are any people who are providing the service component. So those that sell the apple products at the store or at any store. They sell the apples at a farmer's market, or they're selling, somebody who works at Publix selling them to people, that's tertiary. People who work in marketing or advertising of the products, the people who transport, the trucking people who transport the apples. These are all people who work in the tertiary base. Okay, so that concludes our rubric for today. Please make sure that you put down the points and that you explain on each why you're taking points away and what makes it a full credit answer. Again, if you do not support and do not have complete answers, you will get 0 credit for this. This is only 1 point for each, so it's a 0 or a 1. Having 3 to 4